The Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has now commenced. It is April 13th at 4 p.m. This meeting is held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourself until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so we can track quorum. Also, to comply with state open meeting laws, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. So we're going to do roll call. Michael Edmonds is absent. Sharia Jimenez.
Present.
Jim Topol, I am here. Jay Young.
Here.
Mindy Bernstein.
Here.
Lori Mazurbo.
Here.
In Brianna, Washington. Maggie Amato Tejas.
Here.
Wendy Asher.
Here.
Marianne Bierling. Mark Clark.
Present.
Vicky Casino.
Here.
Okay, and Ken Brianna just checked in, so can read. So we've got Michael and Marianne are the only two absent. Okay, ex officio members, Liz Morales. Corn Manning. Did I hear something? Corn? No. Marcos Ismail.
Here.
Marcos and Betty Villegas. Betty. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, 1 second.
Jim,
Yes.
Ernesto here. Mike is trying to get on, so we'll get him on as soon as we can.
So the meeting minutes from our March meeting were not posted, I don't believe. Correct?
I thought they were in the invite, but
Are they?
no, I'm almost sure I sent them out when I sent out the agenda.
They were there.
They were there.
Thank you.
I remember reading them, but I couldn't, I proofed them, but I was not there for most of the meeting, so I couldn't
Oh, here we go.
read them, yeah,
Thank you.
but I looked at
Okay.
them.
So are there any changes to the meeting minutes? Okay. If there's no changes, then without objection, the March meeting minutes are approved. So agenda item number 3 is a call to the audience. This is a time when any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. Due to time constraints, the total time allocated for this is 15 minutes, and individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting law, Commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. So is there anyone who would like to speak? Victoria?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah, so I want to join. I want to be a part of things. I already am. I'm working part-time on all of this right now, and I do copywriting. So I'm building out models. I'm a thought leader. And what I've been trying to do is basically what Mike mentioned. You guys have 3 goals for these subcommittees. So you have your goals. So this is what you want to do. But without like a smart, measurable way to look at these goals, how do you know if you're going to meet them or that you're making progress, right? So I looked into some of those goals and I saw other national organizations with downloadable PDFs of project style plans, totally on top of everything. And I was like, well, that's what we need, man. You know, we need a streamlined success and a way to actually measure it. And so I think that those 2 things are my biggest suggestion. And I went ahead and called my ward office today. I said, where's this office of equity you speak of? I need to get in touch with this woman. Then I went on LinkedIn and I was like, you know, let's get this team together. Let's actually make this happen. Because why is it that the city government doesn't use the same communication forces and manifestations that like other organizations are using? So I am working on that in a huge map called a tree, and it breaks down funding, organizations, what they do at all these different levels. So Admiral Captain Miss Van Helsing is on board, and if you need me, I'm working and I'm looking for work.
Okay, well, thank you, Victoria.
Yeah, that's all I had to say, is just look at others. You know, some common sense, but maybe not so common. So I offer myself.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, so just for the record, Mary Ann and Corin have both joined the meeting. Okay. I think this is going to be a relatively quick meeting today. So agenda item number 4 is the HCD annual report. So is that you, Ann? It's going to be doing that?
It is me. Good evening, afternoon, everyone. So we put this on the agenda. If you have not seen it yet, we have a annual report that highlights all of the key projects and programs and policy areas housing and community development worked on last year. There's a link that I know Rachel or somebody will be adding to the chat imminently. I am also going to share my screen, and I do think it's important to make sure this commission realizes the different pieces of what our department does, and more importantly, has the ability to think through what are areas that we could be improving, what are other areas we should be working on. So that's why I thought it was important to really walk through the annual report. And really, we do this every year. And I want to say Rachel Hutchinson, Ernesto Portillo, Allison Miller, 3 people that you see every month that's working behind the scenes, did an incredible job summarizing the work that we do. And we also know there's a lot we can improve on. And so I do want to walk through the annual report. The other thing to know is we are planning on getting some printed. Not many, please know. I know that it's the era of digital age, but if you're also somebody like me, it is really helpful for me to be able to digest information still. And so we do plan on sending a copy of this report to commission members. If you feel like it would be, if you're not interested in receiving a copy, if it's just a waste of paper, that's okay. Please let Ernesto or I know. So not required, but we did think it would be a good thing to help provide some information on what HCD is doing. So I just wanted to take, I won't go through every single page and every single detail, but I did want to highlight some of the key program areas. There's also a lot of housing and community development staff that attend these meetings. And so, for instance, I see Terry Galligan oversees our public housing agency side of the house. I see Brandy Champion, the Housing First Director. And so please know that even though a few of us attend and talk each month, there's a whole machine behind us. Fortunately, I see Jason Thorpe from the Planning and Community Development Division. So walking through, there's a nice intro from our director, Liz. Moving on, it's divided into sections and loosely divisions within housing and community development. So there's a section on planning, development, and community engagement. You might recognize this fellow over here. Grateful for Mike Edmonds, who is one of the best folks to provide and get good input during our public outreach efforts.
Is that you talking to him?
That is me talking to him, but you can't see me.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Mike is much better in the foreground. We provide a reminder / summary that in 2021, Mayor and Council adopted 2 key plans that guide our department. One early in 2021 was the Planning, Community, and Homes Investment Plan. And then at the end of 2021 was the Housing Affordability Strategy for Tucson. So those plans were adopted in 2021, but 2022 was all about implementation. And so that's why you'll see the check marks throughout the plan. We are really trying to focus on action and implementation. And so just a little reminder what those are. There is a whole section on our housing development and the new development arm and the new housing development manager. And so several pages dedicated to that. Here is, and we highlighted, we know that it takes a village. A lot of this is not our work. Pima County Community Land Trust is working on a site in Barrio Kroger Lane neighborhood. So super grateful for them and Sharia being the architect on that project. And then we also highlight some other organizations we'll touch base on, but this is the Affordable Homeownership Project in Barrio Kroger Lane. We touch on our low-income housing project, Milagro on Oracle. And there's a page on the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. So really wanted to make sure you all know the work you do is valuable. And you know, in future years, we'll want to try to get input on what you think is most important to highlight. Speaking of that, we do need to do our Commission 2022 annual report. Side note. I mentioned Jason's here from the Planning and Community Development Division. There are several pages dedicated to the great work that they do, including the human services contracts. So funding that we provide to support different organizations in the community doing great work. There's a feature on Austin Puka, who became our human services manager last year and often attends these meetings. And so a summary of the organizations funded in 2022 and the money that was distributed to those organizations. Here is a page dedicated to a solar project that happened at Sister Jose's, thanks to some of the federal funding we receive. There is a page dedicated to the continuum of care and the work of Tucson Pima Collaboration to End Homelessness. Some of the public facilities projects that the department supports and or manages these projects. So this picture here is some HCD staff touring the apartment complex that's being rehabilitated. So there'll be 28 affordable housing units coming back online that are much nicer than what was there before. A summary of our affordable homeowner or our affordable rehabilitation project for homeowners, low-income homeowners. And here is a nice, we try to do wherever we can, we try to do stories and to really highlight the work, as we know that that's often a better way to convey information than numbers and charts, even though I love numbers and charts too. This is the home program and the money that we support using our home program and our rehabilitation. And then changing gears, we also talked about our place-based programs, the Thrive in the 05 and the Thrive 29th Street. So information there, I will say, with the action activities that happened in 2022, we dedicated a lot of pages to Thrive in the 05 as there was some really cool work done. So this is a street block painting in Thrive in the 05. The Tucson Inn sign restoration and some other projects associated with the federal funding we received for action activities in Thrive in the 05. So a page on 29th Street Thrive Zone and the new coordinator. That's a new Thrive Zone that just kicked off in 2022, and we expect a lot more will happen in 2023. We talk about our relatively new community engagement piece of what we do. So Ernesto Portillo, was hired as our public information officer in early 2023. In early 2022. And so we did a lot more outreach in 2022 than we had been doing in previous years. There are several pages dedicated to our Housing First program. And I mentioned that Brandy is here often attends these meetings, and the incredible work that they're doing at the Wildcat Inn and some other shelters and in the community. Really impressed with the work that they've been doing. So a summary of that. Talk about the Tucson Homeless, the Vaccine Incentive Program, and the number of people that through the efforts received COVID-19 vaccinations. More information on work doing to address homelessness. And then there's some space dedicated to the public housing portion of what HCD does and the affordable housing and public housing units that HCD owns and operates. There's a great story of a woman living at the MLK apartments. There's a couple pages talking about the new programs happening at the Tucson House. Really grateful to Compass, who organized some great work at the Tucson House last year, and also ASU Ocher. And this art show I thought was incredible. Tucson House artists. I'm curious, Mike, if you had any artwork in the art show. That's a side note. And then some information about the Housing Choice Voucher Program and source of income being adopted, being approved, and information on one of the new apartments that are accepting an apartment complex that is newly accepting Housing Choice Vouchers. And our family self-sufficiency program. And then finally, wrapping it up, we do set some goals for this year that we're in now. And so wanted to take some time today to let you all know that we published this annual plan. We are open to questions, and really more importantly, always looking for feedback from this commission on what we can be doing better and what we aren't doing that we should be doing. I see there is a question from Marianne, but I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Yeah, go ahead, Marianne.
This is fabulous. I can't wait to look at it more. I just think it's fabulous in the world. But the one thing that I'm having a problem with on that is the picture of Jim Toffel. We use something else instead, please.
You and me both.
That's all.
That's fair. We could do a Brady Bunch picture next time, but that was Jim speaking in front of mayor and council. And
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. That's all I have.
I was kind of hunched over because the microphone was low. I had my reading glasses on, and I looked really. I saw some of the pictures, and I looked really angry. I was like, ugh.
Well, you look very serious and focused. That's all. But I'm just teasing. So, okay, I'm done.
Jim, I don't have that problem at the mic with being hunched over.
I thought about like a phone book or something to lift it up. So.
Okay, well, thank you for giving
job.
time and open to feedback.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, to celebrate our successes. I think too often, you know, in this space, it feels like we're in an uphill battle all the time, trying to, because you know, the housing affordability issues, the homelessness, the number of people who continue to need help with housing costs. It feels like it's growing and it's getting worse, but you know, it's amazing what you guys have been able to do with your. I mean, you don't have a huge staff over there. It's a limited group of people, and it's a very impressive list of all the things that you've accomplished. So I want to congratulate you as well. I think it's a really good summary of this last year and everything that's happened, and so congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you again, Rachel.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Ann? Okay. Okay, moving on to the next one. It's a similar topic, which is the LIHTC update. And I'm going to share a screen here. So I just want to give you guys a little bit of a heads up on what's going on with the LIHTC program. So can you guys all see this? You see my screen, the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay. So we've talked about the low-income housing tax credit program before. This is the primary funding mechanism for most new affordable housing projects in the state. Probably 85 to 90% of the affordable housing projects developed through the low-income housing tax credit program. There are two different components of the program. There is the 9%, which is a competitive process that's on an annual basis. And then there's the 4%, which is basically a first come, first serve. The 9% provides about a 75% subsidy. The 4% is about a 35% subsidy to the total development costs. So last year, the Milagro and Oracle project was the only project which was awarded in Tucson. The year before that, it was Newport at Rodeo. And so I specifically have talked a lot about how does Tucson do a better job of competing. So this is a list basically of all of the projects that were submitted. ADOH released this last week, and I put it into a spreadsheet. I basically converted the information over to a spreadsheet. And on the far right, I tried to make a crack at what I think is most likely to receive an award. Obviously, this can change. So everybody reports their self-score, which is the second column is a self-score. There are set-asides. So there's a tribal set-aside, a rehab special set-aside, state special project, rural set-aside, and then everything else falls to the general pool. These projects highlighted in yellow are all Tucson projects. So the first thing I think to note is that we have 5 projects in Tucson which were submitted, which is 2 more than what we had last year. So the Pasco Yaqui Homes 10, which is on the tribe, is going to receive an award. You know, the tribes typically don't submit more projects than there are set aside. So this is kind of locked in. So that's good. On the rehab side, Chicanos por las Casas submitted a rehab for a project off of, I think this is off of Vervington, I think. Casa del Pueblo. It's a senior housing project, 96 apartments, and they're looking to do a rehab. Now, the rehab projects did not submit their self-scores. So we don't know which of these, there's 5 projects, 3 of them will receive an award. We don't know which ones they are. So, you know, I was trying to calculate tax credits. So I just averaged the tax credits requested for those and said 3 of them will receive an award, but we don't know which ones. So there's probably a 60% likelihood that this project will receive an award. Obviously nothing in the rule. So we dropped down to the general pool. We have 3 projects that were submitted. And the great thing is if you look at all the self scores, we have 3 of the top 4 scoring projects in the general pool. So La Frontera submitted a project, West Point Phase 2 was scored 190 points. Belvedere Terrace, which was done by Newport Partners, was 185 points. And then Desert Dove Apartments, which is also 185 points, was GHK Properties. So one of the changes this last year to the tax credit program is they did this kind of for Tucson, but they basically said that the first 2 projects which receive an award, one has to be from Maricopa County and one has to be from Pima County. So we knew we were going to get at least one. So West Point 2 looks like right now it's the highest scoring project in the general pool. And then you have to go to a Maricopa project, which would be La Victoria Commons. And then it comes down to Belvedere Terrace and Desert Dove. They're both 185 points. So the tiebreaker is the unit count. So Belvedere Terrace looks like it'll receive an award. And then, you know, and then potentially Desert Dove if there's enough. I wasn't sure if they were gonna skip the 3rd project in Tucson and go down to Phoenix Scholar House. So the good news is there's 5 projects, and I think there's a decent chance that all 5 might get awarded. And if they do, you know, Tucson's going to get a huge share of the total tax credits. So typically it's between $25 and $30 million, which is given out each year. You can see Pasco Yaqui requested 2.5. Casa del Pueblo requested 1,048,000. Then West Point, Belvedere, and Desert Dove all requested 2.5 million. So this is a huge improvement from the last couple of years. So I'm very happy at the self scores. So that's it. I just wanted everybody to see kind of what was out there. We're going to know in June which projects actually receive an award, and we'll talk about that again when that happens. So I guess I'd like to open up if there's any questions or comments. The one other thing I'll say is that in order to receive max points, the city of Tucson had to contribute a minimum of $500,000 per project. And so, you know, that represents about 2 to 3% of the total project cost. So it's a very small component of the total project cost. The economic development from these projects is huge. So on average, during construction, these things create about 100 full-time jobs each for a year to a year and a half. And then long-term, the city, the county will receive property taxes. And then there's, you know, full-time staff. You know, those are all ancillary benefits in addition to the additional housing units which are created. So I'm going to stop sharing. Anyways, I was happy. I thought it was exciting. That's why I wanted to share it with everybody. So if there's any no comments or questions, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is a discussion on goals and priorities. So Jay, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thanks, Jim. When the call for agenda items went out, this is something that I requested, and am really looking for everyone's feedback here. So part of the reason I wanted to bring this up with the group is because obviously we put together a solid list of recommendations to mayor and council for affordable housing, which was wonderful. And I feel like we spent a lot of our commission energy on that very important goal. And so as I was thinking, kind of where we go from here, I was just wondering what the group feels like are important goals and priorities for the commission and potentially for the subcommittees as well for the remainder of 2023. So I guess I'm just wondering if this is something that the group wants to explore, wondering what people's temperature is with this and kind of how folks are feeling about kind of where we are and where we go from here. So if there's some ideas or discussion, I would be interested to hear it. And if there's not, then that's fine too.
So I'll go ahead and start. I think this is a very important conversation because, even though it's hard to believe we've been meeting now for 3 years, it still feels like we're trying to recreate ourselves, and it's, we've received some direction, but I do think it's important to go back and review our mission and our goals on a regular basis, just to make sure that we're focused as a commission, and that we're working in the direction that we want. Now, leading into this meeting today, we were, I think, struggling a little bit to find agenda items, and I think that's why this meeting is probably going to end a little bit early. And so just to kind of jump on what Jay was saying is I'd like to revisit our mission and our goals, and and then I'd like to just have kind of an open discussion about what do we want to see here for over the next year or the year and a half. So I'm going to share my screen again. So can you guys see this? Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is off of the commission website, and these are the goals that we put in place in July of 2020. So our mission is to review, investigate, and recommend actions to mayor and council based on research, data, and inclusive public input to increase the number of housing units that will, 1, develop and preserve affordability for Tucsonans, including renters, homeowners, and those without housing, protect our barrios and communities from rapid change and displacement, as well as structural disinvestment, and 3, cultivate landlords and developers as partners in providing equitable, accessible, and quality housing. So then we identified goals for our subcommittees. So the affordable housing subcommittee had 3 goals. The first was to provide a set of recommendations to mayor and council on the activities, levers, and tools that the city can leverage to increase the momentum around affordable housing. That was a short-term goal. And I feel like we've done a pretty good job at that. Second is to identify new funding opportunities for affordable housing, both short-term and long-term. And then the third is to deliver a sufficient number, which TBD, of affordable housing units within the city of Tucson. So that's basically identifying a goal of where we want to, how do we define success? On the permanent supportive housing subcommittee is to provide recommendations on policies to increase and accelerate available permanent supportive housing. So both a short-term and a long-term goal. And housing segregation, the goal was to address housing segregation by race, ethnicity, disability, and access to opportunities in Tucson. Housing patterns show legacy of racism. So that is essentially what we came up with a couple of years ago. And so I guess I'd like to also hear everyone's thoughts and how we should, what we should do going forward, and if we need to adjust those goals, our mission, or how we kind of refocus ourselves for the next couple of years. So Shay.
Yeah, I think for me, the priorities were definitely the funding. So I know we have had as a goal to, start looking at the housing bond and, the housing trust fund, getting that reestablished. I think being ready to have all the basically conduits available and ready to receive funding is a great place to start, which I think that's why we were planning on starting with the housing trust fund, getting that reestablished and running again. But also, I mean, there's a lot of like really big, broad goals on the list, and it's hard to know where to start. But something that's not on the list that's been coming to mind for me, because just because of all the conflict I see around the issue with houselessness and security, and just kind of like competing interests around that issue. I don't know if there's any political appetite for this, but I just want to throw it out there that that basically I feel like the houseless encampments are going to continue to be in conflict with community all the time, and that the part of the way to solve that, or to try to address the issue at a root systemic level, is to formalize and legalize the encampments, and to designate an area somewhere where people can exist and have access to the basic amenities, whether it's a porta-john or a physical address. I mean, there could be a host of things that could come with starting to address and talk about the issues of temporary housing, what that means, what does it look like. And to me, temporary shelter is something very different than housing. But that's something I would like for us to keep in mind moving forward, because again, to me, it would be looking at zoning, it would be looking at a lot of really broad, big systemic issues that for me, the whole houseless encampment is like, it's this emergency crisis situation we're in, and we haven't been able to address or talk about it at all.
Okay. I'm gonna try to take some notes here and summarize at the end kind of what we heard, and then maybe we can dive into some of these more detail. Mary Ann?
Yeah, I agree with what was just said about the encampments and temporary housing, and I think that is going to involve a discussion, with all of us, but also with all of the housing department at the city, the mayor's office, the folks working on the encampment, the police department, and the sheriff. So that is, maybe that is some kind of effort for us to proceed with and oversee. I also think we should have a campaign to educate the public in order to create those funding sources we recommended to mayor and council, because if they're going to be voted on, there needs to be a really good education campaign that happens, and which could include everything from having a Facebook page to educate, having a section of the city housing department's website or whatever. But I think that this is going to be a good next step for us, since we did make the recommendations to mayor and council. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Wendy?
Yeah, I have three things. I agree that the issues with the encampments has really gotten more widespread and more of an immediate issue, as Shay said. It's not just kind of, some goals on paper. So I think it needs to be addressed as part of our objectives and goals explicitly. I think Mary Ann's right that, we need to do more outreach and publicity to get the community buy-in, whether it's financial or otherwise. There's a lot of negative talk about, the encampments and the safety issues that creates for people's houses, et cetera. And then the last thing I want to say is that as we have goals and objectives, we need to be able to put in place some ways to measure and evaluate how we are reaching those goals and objectives. And I think we need to sort of focus on that as well, so that we continue to justify what we're doing and what we're recommending, and that can feed back into us adjusting what those goals and objectives are. So I think maybe calendaring that on a regular basis, because otherwise I know from my work and, other situations, it's really easy to get caught up in what's in front of us and kind of forget about the longer term planning that needs to happen to really address systemic issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. Mark?
So this is probably not the time to debate or argue about encampments. But I think as we begin to maybe even think about that, it's important for us to remember that we have the Tucson Pima collaboration in homelessness, or whatever its name is, that both the city and the county are very involved with. I would also suggest, if you want to talk about large-scale encampments, you should drive up to Phoenix if you haven't had that opportunity, and look at the encampment that's around the Human Service Campus up there, roughly in the vicinity of 12th Avenue and Jefferson. And again, I'm not sure what people know about that, but the city up there has been sued by both sides of the issue, and they've gotten now 2 conflicting court findings about what to do with the encampment. So that's a very complicated situation. Certainly, I think our approach down here, at least since the 80s, since we were talking about this in even 84, 85, was to approach this from a much more service-supported, supportive housing, more recently housing first sort of approach. So I mean that would, I think there's a robust conversation to have, but it's going to be important to look at the experience in other parts of the community or other parts of the country as they look at these solutions. And so I have fairly strong feelings about this. You might have figured out.
Thanks, Mark. Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I have a lot of thoughts about this as well, and I'll just start with, I believe what our subcommittee brought to the full commission last meeting. I was not here for it, but we suggested looking at equity issues, including desegregation, gentrification, and displacement. I think that's a huge one. If you also look at the mayor and council ordinance that called us into existence, neighborhood cultural assets, racial inequities, impacts of downtown revitalization, there's a pretty decent list of things that we have almost not touched on at all, that I think we need to. And then I think, one step above, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but just talking about housing stability in a larger context, because that's what homelessness is, right? It's people that are the most housing unstable, and for all of the other reasons that the housing market is not serving them. So, we haven't really talked much about evictions. We haven't talked about things that are, preventing people from having stable housing, which, when people don't, often leads to homelessness. So, housing stability, what can we be doing as a city to make housing more stable, particularly for our most vulnerable residents. I think one of the things also that we're lacking as a commission is a real vision of what housing equity looks like. I mean, when we're talking about moving the ball forward in terms of housing equity, what is our vision for that? Is it that nobody's housing unstable, that there's zero homeless folks? Like, what exactly does that look like, so that when we get together, we can compare what we're doing with our vision? And then the other thing that and our subcommittee, I think, really thinks is important, and just, I don't feel like it's getting traction, is kind of going along with that vision. How are we measuring a change in equity over time? I mean, if we're talking today about homelessness, how are we measuring over time? Are we looking back every year and saying, there are fewer homeless folks, more homeless folks? Or housing stability? Are there more evictions or less evictions? Are there more, multifamily housing complexes in high opportunity areas that are dealing with desegregation? How are we measuring equity? So, I think for me, the vision of what this commission thinks housing equity looks like, how we're measuring it over time, and then really kind of centering housing stability and all of the elements that go along with that. So I know that those are a lot of things, and it's relatively broad, but that's kind of where my head's at with a lot of this.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Marcos?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said by Jay and the others. And, I think that it would be good to kind of like define the priorities, and then within each, like homelessness, addressing poverty, and then setting short-term and long-term goals within each area. And Jay mentioned stabilized housing, stabilizing neighborhoods and communities, I think is another big concern. And then identifying and short-term, long-term goals that can lead to stabilizing, our communities. And I saw an article on social media recently that was somewhat troubling, and it said that Tucson is approaching, it's fast becoming a rental city, and if the current trends continue, in the next few years, our homeownership rate will drop below 50%. And so I think that we need to look at ways to promote homeownership, I think, which has been proven to help stabilize communities. But when I saw that, it kind of shed light on this trend, and I'm just not sure if that's something that our city leaders want to continue. And I think it would be beneficial to pursue ways that we could stabilize neighborhoods, including boosting homeownership. And I know it's not for everybody, but and rental properties and is going to be important as well, and ways to stabilize rental properties and is, I think, also should be included as well as part of stabilization, so that there's a balanced approach, I think, and whatever is done, I think that's what is going to be needed as well. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Marcos. Mark?
To my day job, certainly an area that we've been talking a lot about for the last probably 4, 5, 6 months at PCOA is the number of people that are calling us, older adults who were renters, but who frankly are no longer able to afford their rental housing unit. And my assumption is the reason that our home ownership rates are drying up or reducing is because investors are acquiring more affordable price point housing and frankly, taking it out, often out of service as affordable rental housing. We really have, I don't think we have ever seen, at least not in my background, the level of homelessness the level of homelessness among older adults that's coming at us. We were with our colleagues at Lutheran Social Services and Interfaith Community Services earlier today with some representatives from the Department of Health and Human Services, and we're all sort of getting run over by people, by requests for services for people who really don't. Things aren't affordable to them. I mean, back when I was a younger person, I used to say, don't worry about older folks. They got Social Security and Medicare. They're fine. And the truth of the matter is, people are now coming to us and saying, I was paying $620 a month for rent, and it included utilities. On my $1,200 a month Social Security, my landlord's now told me I used too much gas in February and January, and so he's booting me out. And the likelihood of finding a $700 a month rent utility included apartment these days is pretty and so that's sort of, I think that's probably one of the two major issues we're seeing at PCOA right now in terms of major issues for older adults, that and the shortage of direct care workers. So that's enough.
Jay?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing, and Mark, something you said kind of sparked this for me as well. But one of the things I think that we really need to do as a commission is connect and network. I mean, like Mark said, there are already a lot of folks working on homelessness, but they're not coming to our commission. We're not connecting with them, and the same is true for all of these issues. So I don't know how we can better do that. Obviously, we have just a limited capacity. Just that's the nature of being on a commission like this. But really understanding what else is going on out there, how we can support other things that are going on, as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel. The Prosperity Initiative was here talking. The county's had a affordable housing group that I don't know that we were very connected to. So anyway, I would encourage us also to really network and connect with other organizations and groups that are on the ground, and figure out, with our limited capacity, what exactly can we reasonably do with our time and energy.
Okay, thanks, Jay. So I'm just gonna put one little kind of side comment in here, Shay, and then I'll jump over to you. But I think it's important for us to keep in mind that we're not necessarily doers. We're directors, and we can ask for the city to start focusing on things and maybe work with and leverage departments within the city. And so I think when we're talking about what we're going to do, as opposed to us creating web pages and us putting out different publications and doing outreach and this and that, I think we want to just keep in mind that we can ask the city to do some of these things and work through the city employees and provide recommendations to mayor and council, and say, hey, these are the issues that we think are important and should get addressed, and then they can make those recommendations to the different departments. And as I was listening to Jay talk, there's a new Office of Equity within the city, and she came and spoke to us maybe a year and a half ago, and it was within a month of when she started. So she was still getting her feet under her, and maybe it's time that we bring her back again and listen to how things are going now, and maybe work through some of those equity issues through her. So it was an idea. So Jay or Shay?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to something similar to what Mark was thinking, but I guess I would love to better understand sort of the ecosystem of housing production and development. Basically, it was one of the goals too that was on our list that I thought could be helpful for us to go back to, where how are we actively basically helping, what was it? It was developers and you know, folks basically helping them produce more units. And I think that that's also a really, could be a really maybe more proactive goal. And then with that, but I also kind of want to understand the sort of, because similar to what Mark was saying, I agree that there's something that's happening. There's been an interruption in sort of the natural cycles of housing affordability when it came to renters and tenants, because the naturally occurring of the NOAAs, the naturally occurring affordable housing units, those seem to be in shorter and shorter supply. And so I think having a better understanding of, is it the California investors? Is it a generational, you know, thing that's going on? That, you know, one of the other things that they're saying contributors to the shortage has been, millennial, the generation that's, you know, finally able to buy, is also competing in that market. So I think that there's several large factors and forces that I feel like I would like to better understand before we can even then dive into policy, into how we go about, then helping, preserve those NOAAs and that affordable sort of landscape. So, and I think that market is really not very well studied at all. And I haven't seen a ton of great data or information about any of that.
Thanks, Shay. Vicky?
Thanks. I just wanted to add to something that Mark said, because we're seeing that trend as well. And to note that, so my center serves a lot of low-income disabled people. And so not only is it difficult nowadays to find, affordable rentals, but if you need physical access, it's like almost non-existent. And even though those who have Altex, which I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with that, so that's Arizona's Medicaid program for those who are in the qualify for long-term services. Altex will pay for home modifications, including in rentals, but then they need to get permission, in a rental to do that. And so that's another whole process to convince landlords to allow, major modifications such as door widenings or converting a tub to a shower. And then the other thing about older adults is we're finding that, at least for those who we serve, that more and more are giving up their own homes and living with adult children. And that creates another barrier, though, because they often, are aging into a disability if they don't already have one. And then that home needs to be adapted. And so it just depends on the funding source. And so, we have a new grant from HUD that's specifically for older adults, but it specifies that they have to be the homeowner. And so if their name, isn't on the deed or the mortgage, then we can't serve them. It's just, I guess like I said, I just want to put that out there. It's like this constant battle or kind of like jumping through hoops and figuring out, which system does this person fit into? We're trying to keep people in their own homes so they can age in place and stay out of costly institutions where, frankly, people go to die. And it's just getting more and more challenging. Thanks.
Thanks, Vicky. Jason?
Sorry there. Thanks, Jim. And Just to make an offer to stepping back to the question about opportunities for participation and collaboration with the continuum of care, the Tucson Pima Collaboration and Homelessness, and or simple learning about some of the points that came up around numbers of people experiencing homelessness, what trends are looking like. Our department also serves as the lead agency for the Tucson Pima Collaboration and Homelessness. And so we're absolutely able, if the commission would like, to schedule a presentation of some of the more current data and what trends are looking like, and bring a couple of board members from the continuum of care to that session to be able to have a more collaborative dialogue with the commission. I think they, similar to you all, are a group of very busy people trying to juggle. So I know most of those folks don't also sit here, but I think there are probably lots of opportunities for the two groups to come together periodically and sort of align strategies.
Okay, thank you. What other thoughts or comments in terms of goals and things to think about going forward? Michael? Or Shay, did you have a new one, or? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. I was wondering too. I saw her hand up as well. I just wanted to add on to what has been said about education, and I just want to throw this out real quick. And Brandy, correct me if I misquote you. I don't mean to, but we had a meeting with Brandy in the Housing First subcommittee, and I was very surprised to learn, if I understood Brandy correctly, that the housing homeless protocol has kind of been in effect since 1978. So in my mind, I'd like to know from 1978 till now what has happened, what has not happened, what's been effective, what's failed. I think that information might help us. I just wanted to throw that in.
So I got that information, Mike, from Becky Chavez, the person that formerly manned that kind of project. So I'm not too sure about much more history other than she said that it started at the base of a mountain in 1978. Since then, it's like morphed into all kinds of things. I think TPD got involved. A lieutenant wrote some processes around the protocol at the Tucson Police Department some time ago. Jason, I'm not sure if you know any meaty history on the homeless protocol, but today there's an entire task force dedicated to the protocol, and we've revamped it into a tier system with a whole response survey and ArcGIS data mapping and things of that nature. So Jason, do you know any more detail on that?
I do not. I mean, I know the history that it was for a very long time half a person, and in the last couple of years, as the as unsheltered homelessness has so dramatically increased since the beginning of the pandemic, and through our most recent point time count, we're verifying. We now have data that verifies what we're all seeing in the community, right? And so I think the response has increased pretty considerably since then, and resources dedicated to it. But I don't, the sort of origin story of it, I do not have, Brandy.
Yeah, I wasn't seeking, now I'm just saying, just like as others were saying, maybe some of that information, the history might help us, because we seem like we're seeking information. I mean, I always have been from the beginning. I had felt like I had to start from zero because others had more experience and more knowledge than I. But I was just saying that, there are things I wonder if we can get sometimes, not now, but some kind of understanding as to where we've come from to get from there to here.
All right.
Thank you, Michael. What else? Okay, so I tried to take some notes. I'm going to just recap what I heard and then try to summarize. So we want to continue to look for funding sources for affordable housing. Look at what policies can be put in place for the homeless encampments, which are becoming a larger issue, and addressing temporary shelters. Campaign to educate the public about funding sources. Need to look at other parts of the country to see how they're handling the homeless issues. Need the equity issues and displacement need more focus, including housing stability in a larger perspective, in terms of looking at evictions and what needs to be done to make housing more stable. And then a focus on, well, a vision, what is the vision of what housing equity looks like, and how do we measure over time the changes in equity and housing stabilization? We want to define our priorities in each goal and promote home ownership because of decreasing home ownership in our community. Sorry, I gotta do this on my pad. So address, so another item about addressing our growing issues with encampments, outreach to inform the community to get financial support has increased our understanding of systematic issues, and assure monitoring and evaluation of where we are as a commission in meeting our goals and objectives. Senior community is increasingly having trouble making ends meet. So we want to bring back the equity office to understand what they're doing and how we can work more closely with them. So the naturally occurring affordable housing is increasingly in short supply, and it'd be nice to know what's driving those changes. Accessibility and ADA affordable housing is even more difficult to find than standard affordable housing. There are programs available to make ADA upgrades to their houses. Would like to get a presentation or provide a presentation by HCD on what is being done for our senior community. And then Brandy has some information on what is currently being done with the homeless camps, and it'd be good to understand what is being done before making recommendations on what to change. So, kind of the key topics that are coming out for me and rising to the top is a more engaged focus on homelessness, and what should be done. Is there policies or changes that should be made at the city level surrounding the homeless issues? I think the equity and issues, and then our senior population and accessibility, and what could be done around those issues. So I think those are kind of the three kind of themes that I heard. So Maggie.
I also kind of I like what Vicky was saying about the jumping through hoops. So it's one thing to do outreach and inform people on the financial resources available, but also we're having an issue just with our Barrio project and the funding source, the jumping through the hoops, what can be done and can't be done. And I think we need a better understanding as a community about those funding sources, what can and can't be done, because I feel like there's a little disconnect times as to what can our funds receive as a community use for. We've been talking about the whole ADU project for a long time now, and the Barrio Vita project, and come to find out that there's just some issues there, and I think that's something that we just need to understand. And I think understand whether it's
Maggie.
But I'm sorry, am I popping out again?
Yeah, I think we're having a hard time understanding you.
Just a better understanding of the funding sources and the jumping through the hoops, like what is it that we can do with these funds from the get-go? What can we not do? And who is putting these requirements? And what can we do about them? Can you hear me? I don't know. I think I need a new computer. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. All right. Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you. One piece that we left out was prevention. How we can robustly support people prior to losing their housing. I know that we have different funds and programs. I need not, I don't think, remind you that we are going to be seeing a significant increase of homelessness due to climate change. People are going to be moving to more, well, we have a lot of water insecurity that we're going to be having to address soon. And I think our numbers are going to just be climbing. And I have also never seen, and what we're discussing, I'm sorry, not, my voice is bad. What we're discussing in this commission, every city across this nation is experiencing as well. This is not just a Tucson problem. These exact, the commission goals, subcommittees, what we're doing is a critical issue across the nation. And there was a woman who was in the call from the audience who had volunteered to share with the commission her abilities just about measurements. And I don't want to get too off track. I wanted to bring up prevention and a very high possibility we are going to see even higher numbers of individuals facing homelessness. That's it. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Mindy. Okay, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of good things have been discussed here, and so the question is, what do we do? How do we address these going forward? I mean, the other thing that's been in the back of my mind is, we provided a series of recommendations on things that can be done to increase the affordable housing supply. I'd like to try to, see if those are moving forward, or, what can we do to keep pushing that forward? Because just because everybody voted to enact them doesn't magically mean that they're done. It means, we need, it means it's the beginning of the work, not the end of the work. So, what I could use everyone's help with going forward is identifying agenda items, specifically around some of these areas that I am not as experienced in, the homelessness, the equity related issues, and some of the senior and accessibility issues. So I guess I would ask the other commission members to think about this, and maybe we can talk about it again next month and try to set some more concrete goals. And then just, I could use help getting the agenda items on the agenda. So Jay, I don't know if this is kind of what you had in mind. I hijacked it a little bit.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to open up the discussion and hear what people had to say so we could kind of forge a path forward. So yeah, no, great, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that it's a good discussion. It's an important discussion to have on a regular basis. Make sure that we're doing the things that we need to be doing. So is there any other comments or final comments or thoughts before we move on to the next agenda item?
I just have a hard stop at 5:30. I'm meeting with TPD, so I'll be hopping off.
Okay, thank you, Brandy. Okay, let's move on to the subcommittee updates. First is Mindy, did you have another item? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did. Will we be discussing in this meeting Michael Edmonds' departure from the commission? And will that be discussed today?
Jim, I'll jump in and say during the HCD, I do plan on telling you updates that I'm aware of for the vacant seats and talk about the Mike situation. And Mike can talk about the Mike since he's here, but I do plan on that during HCD updates.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so subcommittee updates, housing first. So back to you, Mindy.
That's me? I mean, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
I think I did not take notes because I thought Michael would be reporting. So this is just off the, we identified that the Housing First Committee does not have a city designated budget and would like to put forward a recommendation that the city, even though the budget has already been settled on, to reconsider or finding a robust amount of dollars to put into the Housing First programs, as there will be a much bigger need coming forward. And as we talk about encampments and homelessness, Housing First really proves to be cost effective in that we are not paying for first responders, we're not paying for jail, ERs, prisons, the loss of tax dollars that people who can have experienced homelessness can return to work and become contributors into increasing taxes for the community. We discussed, I think that's all I'm remembering. That was because that was my focus.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So was that a change for the city where they previously funded Housing First through HCD and then they discontinued it, or is this something that we've never had?
It was my understanding in the conversation that there is not a line item budget that is robust, which to meet the goals and the needs that the city is experiencing to address the homelessness. I went to visit the Wildcat Inn and had a wonderful 2 hours there. I am absolutely blown away. They are doing a phenomenal job. They are model, there's other cities that are doing similar kind of Housing First programs. Seattle, program called Seattle Cares. In order for housing for, we have this, it looks like this amoeba of issues. And I think that if we looked at I asked if we could look at the funding, the costs that are associated with the encampments and homelessness, besides the humanitarian costs and the civil rights costs, not providing supports for vulnerable adults. I was just very curious if the city had looked at, what are we paying for emergency rooms? What does it cost? It costs over $100,000 to petition someone for a psychiatric crises. So I keep looking at prevention and solutions. And part of our housing the subcommittee was that there is not a big budget for the Housing First programs.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. Is this something we want to put as an agenda item for next commission meeting to talk about Housing First funding? Or is this something that in your subcommittee you want to continue to discuss, to come back to the
in the subcommittee? I believe that we had talked about having the commission, the full commission support to look at the that we cannot wait a year for funding to be put into the Housing First programming through the city budget. And so we were hoping to ask the commission to draft a recommendation to city council members that funding has to be found.
Okay. All right, Shay.
Well, I was just wondering if we could make that request a little more broad. I mean, there's no city allocated funding for housing in general. I mean, housing is just not in the general budget yet at all. So I know that Pima County was able to put 5 million of their general funds towards affordable housing this past year. And I don't know, Mindy, I love this suggestion. I think it's great. I would love it to just maybe just be a little bit more broad as a goal to work on. But I don't know that it seems very political, and I don't know how
it's very political.
Feasible it is at this point in time. It seems like a longer term goal. I'm not sure how feasible it is to accomplish short term.
It is political. It's remained political. We've skirted around it. I'm trying to regulate my emotions right now. It is a humanitarian crisis like I have never seen in Tucson and across the nation. I recently was in Los Angeles. I feel dehumanized when I see people that are living rough in encampments, even though that may be some people's choice. I've just never seen this before. And I would feel that I was not doing my piece as a commissioner to bring the attention to getting more funding into the solutions of our homelessness. That would, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Shay and Mindy. Nesto and then Liz.
Thanks, Jim. And commissioners, just to add to Mindy's discussion from this week's Housing First subcommittee, yes, the subcommittee talked about possibly forwarding a recommendation to the full commission on funding for First. And I suggested to the subcommittee, which will meet in 2 weeks, to continue its discussion. And if at that time it came up with a recommendation, then forward it to the full commission for its May meeting.
Yep. Liz?
Thank you, everyone. I would love to share what Mayor and Council has done for housing. I think to say that there's no city allocated funding is not completely accurate. But again, let us put together what that looks like. And I'm always for funding, so don't get me wrong. That's your job as a commission to advocate for more, and I would fully support that. But I want to make sure you have good information before you go to Mayor and Council. So happy to pull that together so you have that information.
Jay?
I was just going to say that my understanding is that the budget is not done, but it's still an ongoing discussion. Is that Is that accurate? I just heard that it was not a that it was decided already.
Mr. Chair, if I can answer that.
Yep.
So the budget is not in place. They're having conversations. As the budget will have recommendations, and even though the federal funds are not city general funds, that is included in the budget because they have to approve that as well. But there are some recommendations in there. Potentially, I don't remember what is actually been posted yet. There is mayor and council materials, which I just printed. I haven't looked to see if there's any detail on the budget, but I welcome you to look at the mayor and council materials around the budget that's going to be discussed this coming Tuesday.
Thank you. So just Mindy, just to kind of wrap up this conversation, I think what I'd like you to do is you're meeting again in 2 weeks. Is that correct? And our next commission meeting is going to be May 4th. So our next commission meeting is actually in 3 weeks. And if you guys could maybe come back with a more formalized recommendation of what you would like, and then let's add this as an agenda item to our next meeting so we can discuss it, and more thoroughly. Does that sound good? Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments or thoughts on Housing First? All right, housing segregation, Lori?
Actually, Jay, were you planning on? I don't have notes in front of me.
Jay?
I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Sure. So one of the things that we did is we were able to invite Larice to come and talk to us from the equity office, just to create that connection, if nothing else, to our subcommittee. So we obviously think it's critical that our commission is in touch with that office and helping to support them the best we can. I think a lot of what they're doing is internal at this point, which, I understand, but, time is of the essence, I think, with a lot of these issues. So, the more that we can kind of get it focused into the community, I think it is critical, but, understand that they're, in a lot of ways still establishing themselves as an agency and figuring out all of the different elements that they can and should get involved in. But we had a good conversation. She was gracious enough to come and talk to us, and we agreed to stay in touch and help support as much as we can and have her to our subcommittee meetings, as frequently as it makes sense. So that was great. We talked also about the Prosperity Initiative that Pima County is doing, and that they presented to us again last meeting that I wasn't able to attend. But in talking about connecting and networking, to me, that is the best framework that I have seen coming out of any, whether it's city, county, whatever. So I really encourage us as a commission, and the subcommittee encourages the commission to really stay in touch with that and to build on what they're doing. They're really thinking about how to operationalize equity, how to think about it, and how to really, develop an equity lens for all policies to be viewed through. So, I think that that's really good work that we can build on. Let's see what else. I think the other thing also that we keep coming back to, that again I feel like seems to be a little bit stuck in place, is again, we had the students from ASU last semester, which was now 4 months ago, provide a pretty good report for us to move forward to create a baseline of equity, understand where we are as a city, and then how to move forward in terms of measuring going forward, like we've talked about a number of times. So, I know on the one hand that's extra work for HCD, which I know that their capacity is limited, like all of ours is, but we just think that that's critically important and would love to see some movement on that. I think that's a place where we can really create some impact as a commission. So I'm not sure exactly how to get that unstuck, but I do think that that's something that we need to move forward with. What else did we talk about? I think those were the main. We also mentioned gentrification and displacement. That comes up a lot for us. Again, needing to really address that. And we also shared a report that focuses on the city of Austin and how they are measuring gentrification and implementing strategies as soon as possible to prevent gentrification. Because once it's kind of happening and people know that it's happening, it's really hard to reverse and do much about and to help keep folks from being displaced. So anyway, that is our report that I remember. Does anybody else from the subcommittee have anything to add before I turn it back over to Jim?
Any questions on housing segregation? Mindy?
Yeah, I wanted to add that one of the other discussions was around how the equity, that Jay, how your subcommittee and the Housing First subcommittee have commonalities, and to think about where our overlap might be and support each other.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to affordable housing. Shay?
Yeah, I also don't have my notes or agenda, but it was a pretty short meeting. We had some updates from HCD, from Corin. Corin updated us on the recent, that was good news. The recent zoning amendments that were proposed were all pretty much approved, correct, when it came to reducing parking requirements for smaller multi family developments and setbacks along major streets and routes corridors. Those all went through, so that was good news. And then we had most of the discussion I remember centered around trying to figure out, it ties back to our goals as well, and measurement. How do we measure? One way to track whether or not we're producing enough housing units is to have a goal for how many housing units we would want to, shoot for in production every year. So there was a lot of discussion on that, and similarly to other issues, we need more information. That's part of the issue. We need more. I think we need a way to track also. That was actually a similar conversation I heard at the Pima County Housing Commission around houselessness, was that there haven't been great mechanisms in place even to track those kinds of numbers. So it's something people are working on in that area as well. So similar, I think, for housing production, it is actually difficult to get outside of federally, especially outside of federally. You can pretty easily find projects that are light tech or that have received federal funding, but any project that is outside of that, especially private projects, it's going to be really hard to track the data for that. So so we had that's I think an ongoing discussion, has been an ongoing discussion in our subcommittee for a while. So those were kind of the two major updates. Jim, am I missing anything?
No, you did a good job. Any questions for Shay? Okay, agenda item number 8 is the HCD updates. So Liz and Ann.
I'm going to jump in, but Jim, before we get there, and I'll say this is part of CD updates because it's on the agenda. I don't know if Vicki or anyone wants to give an update on the accessibility working group that was created. Want to make sure this is part of HCD updates because we helped coordinate the working group. And we can do next if you prefer, but I want to at least make sure you have an opportunity.
No, because I think we have things in the works. I don't know that we have anything to report yet. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. And let's just make sure we add that as a subcommittee / working group for next time. Okay, I know there have been questions and I wanted to give an update, and Mike Edmonds, feel free to jump in here. We did hear from the clerk's office this week that they feel like Mike being on the commission is a conflict of interest. Mike, feel free if you want to jump in, but Mike did suggest if that is the determination, that wondering if he could be ex officio. And I do think that's something I'd like to explore. I think that will require mayor and council with a change, but I think it could be really worth it. So this next month, I will commit to talking to the clerk's office and seeing if make that happen. But Mike, Jim, feel free if you have any comments on that update.
I don't. Just in general, I sent a letter to cehd@tucsonaz.gov, and as well as to Ernesto and Jim. So if anyone wants to see the resignation, I'm sure he can get you a copy of it. Basically, I just want to thank everybody for everything.
And wait, Mike, you're not going anywhere.
Well, I see, because this is the way I understood it, they considered there was an issue, so I needed to resign. So I sent a letter of resignation. Yeah,
I do want to explore at least seeing how to have you formally involved, but please, anyone is always welcome to informally. I mean, I'm not on the commission in any formal capacity, so please know you're always welcome to attend. And so I do want to explore seeing if we can go an ex officio route. To me, having somebody who's living in one of our housing complexes is really important. So that is something that I will explore, and likely the commission will have to take action next month on that.
Yeah, I'll second that. And when Mike called yesterday, I told him that I thought he had a very important role to play on the committee. I didn't want to see him go, and asked him if he'd be willing to stay on as an ex officio. So I agree with you. Marianne?
Yeah, I agree totally with Mike still being involved with the commission in some formal way.
Agreed. I do really appreciate all of your time and effort, Mike, and want to tie you down still.
It might be
if
helpful,
possible.
and if that our recommendation to mayor and council is that we add an ex officio member that's director appointed of a housing participant or resident, and create that ex officio.
Yeah. I mean, we can agendize it too. We can just bring it to mayor and or the PHA mayor and council. Sorry, mayor and council.
Can someone just explain what the conflict is? Did I miss something?
In short, Michael's been doing some work with the Ward 3 office, and he now has an employee ID number, and City of Tucson employees are not eligible to be voting members of the commission.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And that one clarification there, that's a city charter in terms of, I think in Mike's case, and Mike, again, feel free to speak for yourself, but it's sort of part-time ad hoc. So that was why I felt comfortable before saying it was okay. It's not, but other people have weighed in here. It is a city charter item.
Okay, that's where I didn't look, because I was looking at the conflict of interest statement that we have posted. That was the first thing I found. I didn't think to look through the city charter because I remember there was something in there, but I thought, well, this is my view, everybody. It's just, this is just me. Yeah, it's on call, like she said, on call part time. It had had nowhere near addressing anything about housing or anything. It was literally labor. It was, on and off, not consistent, very, I mean, I'm going to use the description pocket change, if you will. Okay, if you'll accept that. And apparently, by the way the charter is written, again, which I just learned, I guess I'm not allowed to participate in the way I have been.
So I did want to provide, I do know we're short on time. I know we have a few different HCD updates. Mindy, did you have anything else related to?
No, it's just about Michael. And I wanted to ask Michael, we're talking about you in the third person. Are you still wanting to stay connected with the commission?
Yeah, it is in my resignation letter saying that, I'd be willing, if allowed, to be ex officio.
And, and if what you're doing is just ad hoc, very temporary, at some point, you may not be working for the city of Tucson and can come back as a commission person.
I mean, that's quite possible. It's just, I, to be blunt, I needed a job. They were able, they needed the labor, and that's just the way it's been. And it wasn't consistent. It's not part-time. It's not even part-time consistent. It's on and off. It's on call. It's, hey, we need something done. Can you do it? Yes, I can.
Thank you, Mike, and I'll be in touch, but that's something we will commit to exploring and try to move forward. A couple other updates regarding, so with Mike stepping off as a voting member, that means we have 4 vacancies on the commission. I will say positive news, and it's on the mayor and council agenda. I'll send a link. I did notice their next agenda. They do have 2 nominations moving forward. So hopefully be at least 2 more members that get confirmed at the next mayor and council meeting, but that will still leave 2 more seats, and we have some incredible applications. So we'll continue to ask our mayor and council to try to move forward with filling the 2 seats that now are vacant with Joanna Carr and now Mike stepping off. So wanted to give that update. Any questions that?
So just from a logistics perspective, Michael is our vice chair. And so we're going to need to nominate somebody else to be the vice chair moving forward. I don't know if we want to wait for the new members to come on board, or if we want to try to do that in the next meeting.
I would just say wait till next meeting just to agendize it, since it's not on this agenda.
Yep. Okay.
Here's the agenda, putting it in the chat. So one other update from me, and then I know Liz and Jason both have updates from HCD, but one other update on our end. I mentioned, I believe it was last meeting, that we had a neighborhood meeting for Dunbar Spring Affordable Housing Project. Just want to make sure everyone knows we have another public meeting on Saturday. This is for the Westmoreland Affordable Housing Project. It's in Menlo. And so Saturday at 9 a.m. we will be on site at the Westmoreland site. I know that this is a site that has been many attempts at developing affordable homeownership. And so looking forward to continuing to move this project forward. And that's happening on site. And I'll turn it over to Liz for some other updates, and then Jason.
So I wanted to share that at the last meeting, we had Bonnie Pizzata present to the commission on, and I believe Keith Bentley was probably here too, went over the prosperity initiative, the 2 policies that were going to mayor and council. It did go on April 4th with mayor and council approved. those two policies, one was around access to early childhood education, and also the housing mobility to higher opportunity areas geographically. And so just like this commission supported that, mayor and council agreed. And so thank you for providing your input. That was part of the presentation. And so just wanted to give you that update on how that came about after your meeting. And I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thanks, Liz. Excuse me. I will be brief, but just wanted to share two sort of resources and updates with you. So I just dropped two links in the chat, although one link doesn't appear to be working on its own. But if you copy and paste, it will. So, so the first is our fiscal year 2024 HUD annual action plan. So as we've talked about some over the last few meetings, each year we have to put together a plan which is submitted to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which outlines our planned uses for home investment partnership funding, community development block grant funding, emergency solutions grant funding, and housing opportunities for persons with AIDS program funding. And so that's all part of an ongoing community participation process. So prior to developing the annual action plan, we held a public hearing, which about 44 community representatives, largely from community organizations, many of which participate in those funding programs, and many of you attended, received input from community groups, then put together this plan, which is now out for public comment. So it is available on our website. And so folks can absolutely review the plan, provide comment in writing in response to the public comment period. Additionally, there will be a public hearing, a final public hearing before mayor and council on May 9th. And that's in the regular meeting, so the 5:30 p.m. meeting. There will be a public hearing and opportunity to provide input there as well. And so while not, the annual report, which is this wonderful storytelling and great images, the annual action plan is much more a federal document. So I will not pretend it is not a dry read, but it does really outline what the department will be doing over the coming year. And so a couple of items I just wanted to highlight for you that are new or new again for us this year is try to new again, some things we haven't done in a while, but have introduced in this year's annual action plan. And so the first is supporting affordable homeownership programs. And so these programs that I mentioned are going to be familiar to you because you've seen them in the PCHIP recommendations that we put forward. Those funding recommendations are what drives this plan. So we're able to invest in the construction of new homes for sale at below market value to low-income homeowners. The city hasn't done that in several years, so we're really excited to be reintroducing that into our funding strategy. And then additionally, for the first time in several years, we are awarding funds for public facilities projects to nonprofit organizations to support facility infrastructure. And so supporting the expansion of a homeless shelter program, the Sister Jose Women's Center, supporting the transition of Emerge's domestic violence shelter from congregate to a non-congregate shelter model long-term, and then investing in the new Center for Housing First that's being built and are rehabilitated and developed by Old Pueblo Community Services. So really excited to be reintroducing those types of funding to our community partners. And there's lots of other great information about the work we're doing. Encourage you to check that out. And then more excitingly, it is also National Community Development Week this week, which is communities across the country try to highlight the impact of the Community Development Block Grant and the Home Investment Partnerships Program funding. So two HUD programs that are always, have been chronically underfunded. And so this highlighting is both an opportunity for communities to celebrate and recognize the impact of HUD dollars, but also for Congress to and local congressional delegations to see the impact of that funding in their community and advocate for increases. So this year, our department, particularly the strategic planning and community engagement team, worked with our crew to develop a story map, so a virtual like webpage that looks at the past 10 years of funding in those programs, the types of projects we've invested in. It's about $74 million worth of funding that's been invested in that time. And so there's lots of quantitative impact, talking about the number of people impacted, homes rehabilitated or built, things like that, dollars and how they're distributed. But some really cool things. There's highlights of the impact on those dollars in organizations and in individuals who've been supported by them, as well as a map that allows you, an interactive map where you can look in your own neighborhood and check out some of the specific projects that have been funded. So a really great resource that we're highlighting a lot this week. If you follow us on social media or our news, you're seeing this, of course. But then additionally, we'll be continuing to update that interactive map going forward and trying to make it not just a resource for this 1 week, but really an opportunity to highlight the impact of the work the department's doing in the community.
My turn. Real quick, and I put it into the chat. Jason, I'm sorry, did you finish? Thank you. Couple of things. April 27th, Southwest Fair Housing Council is holding a Modern Solutions for Community Stability forum here, not here, nearby at the YWCA here on Bonita. I put the link in. If you can attend, please, and share it with your networks. Also on April 28th, on Friday, HCD will sponsor a virtual forum celebrating Fair Housing Month with a forum focusing on mapping racist covenants project out of the U of A, and putting out some reminders on that tomorrow to the commissioners. And again, please share all this with your professional and personal network so that we can widen our understanding and knowledge about what's going on in our communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Is there any questions for anyone at HCD? Okay. So that brings us to agenda item number 9, which is our next steps. So the next full commission meeting, as I said earlier, is in 3 weeks on May 4th. The Affordable Housing meeting, subcommittee meeting is going to be June 1st. The Housing First subcommittee is, June 1st is the following full commission meeting. The Affordable Housing subcommittee is April 19th. Housing First is April 26th, and Housing Desegregation is April 27th. So if you have any agenda items, please make sure to send them to Ernesto and me. And with that, we are adjourned. It's 5:55 p.m., 5 minutes early. So everybody have a good couple weeks.
You too. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and everyone.